Jerry, I have the program from the 1958, the first Tchaikovsky competition in Russian here. My wife Sasha found it online. Okay, so here it is. I'm going to share the screen. Can you see this?
Yes, yes, I see myself.
Um, so there you are on the left. I
Yes.
can't say that I would have recognized you.
Well, that's not a characteristic photo. For one thing, I always wear glasses,
Uh-huh.
and I look strange without glasses. And even to me, I look strange.
Okay, so I think your program is pretty special and was maybe kind of unusual for the
It made
time.
a great impression, my program, because as you're going to say, I think uh, both the out of door suite of Bartok and the Hammerklavier Sonata of Beethoven were considered non-socialist works,
Hmm.
and they were quite controversial, and people were very excited by the Bartok.
And
Only first, fourth, and fifth movements.
of the Bartok.
Hmm.
Interesting. And you didn't have to play a first round because you had gotten the first prize of the Darmstadt, and certain competition prizes meant you got to surpass that round. So let's see. Sash can translate
Or you
the.
can read
Well,
it.
I can do some of them. I see Chopin B minor sonata is listed. Shostakovich, is that a prelude and fugue in F sharp minor?
Hmm.
Um,
Major, major.
oh, doesn't it say minor?
All right, all right, all right, all right. Minor. You're the prelude is in minor, and the
I
yeah.
see.
Okay.
The Hammerklavier, that says Vara, what does that say?
Balakirev.
Oh, Balakirev. This must have been one of you had to choose from certain
It's the
Russian
famous one.
works. Um,
Is
Islame
yes.
and
Islam. Yes.
the Sonata number six of I guess Prokofiev.
No,
Wait,
it
who's
starts with an S.
oh Scriabin six, of course. I knew that was your piece. The
Tchaikovsky.
Tchaikovsky sonata in is it G major first movement
No, no,
that
no, no, no,
oh,
no. C sharp minor
C
actually.
sharp minor. I think
No,
that's
no, no. What I played was a G major.
oh you played the G major.
Okay.
Must be a
I won't say it doesn't say C sharp minor, but I never learned the C sharp minor.
may have been a misprint and then the Bartok yeah
Out of
Romanian
door suite. Right.
yes okay so out of doors that's right so did you play all of this at once because that's quite a
No, no, no. I didn't. That was offered. What I played was the Shostakovich uh, Prelude and Fugue and the first movement of the Tchaikovsky G major sonata, which was obligatory, and the Hammerklavier sonata of Beethoven, and the out of door suite. That's what I remember. I did uh, in other places. I played the Scriabin sonata, um, and I was Mr. Neuhaus arranged for me to play the Scriabin in the Scriabin Museum, which I did, and I also played in some schools, and I got a wonderful note from somebody in the school saying, "Please, please, play pieces by Bartok." It was very, very touching to me. Um, and on the other hand, I also played the Islame in schools, and people said to me, "Why didn't you play that in the competition?" My my competition program was challenging and meant to be so.
and the fact that you didn't play it all you said you offered it who did the jury choose what they would hear
I think so.
that's interesting because if I scroll to Van Cliburn's page he also offers a very long second round. I think everyone has, nearly 2 hour, an hour and a half or 2 hours worth of repertoire offered in that second round. But I looked up in multiple biographies and also on the recording from his semifinal or from that second round, and I couldn't find anywhere him playing Prokofiev's Sixth Sonata, Brahms' Handel, or the Appassionata, and yet they're listed here. So that seems to confirm my suspicion that these complete programs were not actually performed, and that only maybe about 55 or 60 minutes of
That's right.
repertoire. Okay.
That's right.
Interesting. Well, there's Van, but we'll get to him in a second because I imagine you must have known him and you were a witness to what transpired. But I would just love to know more about your experience. Let's start with the Beethoven and the Bartok, and then we can talk about other things. You said they were non-socialist works. I'm assuming, or they were regarded that way. Did you know that going in? Was this somewhat of a polemical decision on your part?
Yes. Yes. The
Tell us
answer.
about that.
Yes. The answer to your question is yes.
What made you, so you kind of went in there with trying to make a statement of some kind.
That's right.
Where did you get that idea, or what motivated you to do that? How did you even hear about this competition, and what sort of inspired you to present this particular program?
You have to imagine what the Soviet Union seemed like in 1958. Going there was like going to the moon, and I was deeply aware of the provocativeness of going there altogether. And I heard about the competition, and I received an advance notice of it saying that it was 6 weeks long. And I was in Paris on a Fulbright, and I had to get permission from the Fulbright Commission to be away so long. So I was studying with Alfred Cortot and his assistant Jules Gentil. So I asked Mr. Gentil to give his permission for me to go to Moscow, and he said bien sûr, bien sûr, and he then told the Fulbright Commission that on no account was I to be permitted to go to Russia. So I was quite angry, and I decided to give up the Fulbright. I didn't do that, as you know, but I wanted to, but I didn't have money, and I was arranging things. And then I learned that the competition was not 6 weeks long, but the whole competition was 6 weeks long, but that included violin and cello. And what involved me was only 2 weeks, and those were the 2 weeks that were vacation in France, so that I didn't have to get permission. So I was able to go, and it was a great adventure for me to go. And Stalin had died only recently, and the feeling of mystery still surrounded the Soviet Union. So I applied. I knew that Van was applying. Yes, as you say, I knew Van from Juilliard. We were in some classes together, and of course I knew that he was remarkable, but that didn't worry me. I was very confident. Finally, there were 4 Americans who went to the competition. Daniel Pollack, Norman Shetler, and I went as part of the French group because I was living in Paris at the time.
Is Joyce Flissler?
Joyce Flissler was the other
Yeah.
American in the in the violin competition, of course. Um, and yes, she was very nice. Um, I went, as I say, with the French contingent, and I became very friendly with some of the French members. There were lots of amusing personal interchanges, and such there were also later. Uh, for example, after the competition, there was a recital given by Vladimir Ashkenazy, who had been a previous winner, and not of this competition, of course, but of another competition. And I was sitting at this recital with the youngest contestant in the competition and the prettiest also. Um, she she was very fresh and innocent, and she had no idea who Vladimir Ashkenazy was. Anyway, reader, she married him, and that's the famous Mrs. Ashkenazy. Um, um, I was sitting right there. We we had programs in Russian, and she asked me to identify some of the things she was playing. Um, so that was another marriage in the future was that of Lazar Berman. Now, Berman had met the young woman in question. Can you, by any chance, remind me of his name, of her name? Um, she was a French Italian young woman and very European, very Western, and
Um, Valentina
that
Sido.
that's his second wife.
Okay.
That's that's Valentina is. I'm getting to Valentina. Uh,
Okay.
let,
The
let
first.
me
Mhm.
let me go back.
Uh-huh.
She'd met Berman in Budapest, and she'd fallen in love with him,
Mhm.
and she decided she had to marry him, and she had to come to Russia. Well, you couldn't just do that. She wanted to study there, but it all had to be kept very secret. But I was aware of it because I was in the French group, and Berman joined us in the plane in Budapest, and everyone was whispering about it. And uh, when in Moscow, there was a dinner after the competition, and I was talking to this young woman when Khrushchev arrived to talk to her, and he said, "I understand you want to get married." She was terribly shocked because this was supposed to be a great secret, and she said, "Well, yes," and he said, "Well, we'll see." And eventually, of course, they did get married, and of course, it was a disaster. And um, years later, I was sitting on a jury with Valentina, and I told her that I knew his first wife, and she said, "He says it was all the girl that," and I said, "Well, that's exactly what his friend said," which was true, uh, and I think it was true that she, c'est le destin. She kept saying, it's destiny, and uh, she was so committed to this marriage. But they did get married, and they got divorced, and he married Valentina. I don't know if Valentina is alive. Do you know?
I'm not sure. Um, and as I try to find the name of this first wife, all it says on the internet is he was married to a French woman and not therefore not permitted to tour abroad. or something.
That's right. That's right. That's right. It,
Uh,
it was
yeah.
it was a mistake, of course, but
Mhm.
but Valentina was lovely, and actually, um, she said, "You know, we've been married for we're going to be married for 25 years." I said, are you celebrating?" She said, uh, "We're having a very small party, just our closest friends. Of course, you're invited," she said. I said, "Well, don't say that twice, or I'll accept." And she did, and I did, and I was very free in those days. I didn't have a job in Juilliard, you know, and so I simply took a plane and went to their wedding in Italy, which was lovely, and they were both extremely charming, and I, I've lost touch with her, and I don't even know if she's alive.
Returning in 1958, so you met the, I guess, president of Russia. Is that what they called him, or prime minister? Khrushchev.
I sort of met everybody, you know,
Mhm.
in a formal way, and um, one connection I had before I went there was through my teacher Steuermann. Uh, Steuermann, who taught at Juilliard and who was Polish, had in his youth met. You gave me his name a minute ago, and the
Neuhaus?
Neuhaus. Yes, uh, they had become close friends when they were, I think, in their late teens, and he gave me a letter for Neuhaus actually, and Neuhaus was charming, and he said he asked about Sturman, uh, and he said we spoke French, but he said I understand that he was a dodecaphoniste, a 12-tone person. He said un peu dodecaphoniste, and I said pas un peu mais beaucoup, and he laughed. You know, of course, again, to be a 12-tone composer in the Soviet Union was not good news, and it, it was daring of him even to talk about it.
So Neuhaus appreciated your playing, it sounded like.
Yes, and he wrote about it actually.
Mhm.
I, I don't have the book, but I know that he wrote about me in something.
Was it specifically the Hammerklavier or
No, it was mainly the Bartok, I think, that
Mhm.
everybody loved so much.
So these are
But
considered non-socialist works, and yet they're works that create art out of folk music. You'd think maybe there would be some socialist element to them, but I guess they didn't have a concept of Bartok's music wasn't well known. Richter recorded the second Bartok concerto. I mean, it wasn't completely unknown, surely, but
no, of course, but Richter wasn't allowed outside the Soviet Union, and
mhm.
he was a hushed name. Uh, he gave a recital when I was there at the end of my stay there, and you know he was a legend, and no one in the West had heard of him, or rather had heard him. Everybody had heard of him, and
He would come to the United States 2 years later,
that's
famously,
right, that's right,
but
that's
not
right.
yet. In 1958, nobody had heard him from the
No,
U.S.
so in Moscow, he was giving a recital, and I was, of course, looking forward very much to go, and I was dressed and ready to go to the concert when there was somebody at the door, a very charming young girl, that is a student girl, um, and there was a little struggle with language, but it turned out that she was a granddaughter, I think, of Scriabin, and she was there to take me to the Scriabin Museum. I, of course, didn't know about this, and I said, "Well, I can," and no, you have to. So I went to the Scriabin Museum. It was what Neuhaus had arranged on the basis of my playing the Sixth Sonata, and I went to the museum, which was Scriabin's home, and the audience consisted of old people and young people. Uh, that is, special people. Uh, and I played the the Sixth Sonata for them, and they said they were very enthusiastic, and they said, "And now, would you play some shorter pieces of Scriabin?" And there was a silence, and they said, "You play shorter pieces by Scriabin." Well, I didn't, but I didn't feel like saying that, and I didn't say it. I said, "Oh, of course, I play preludes and nocturnes and this and that." I said, "But what I would really like to do is play again the Sixth Sonata." Oh, we didn't dare ask for that, so I played it again, and they brought me pictures of Scriabin and oranges. Oranges were very hard to get in the Soviet Union at the time, and they filled my coat pockets with oranges, and I still had time to hear the second half of Richter's recital, which now I have on CD, or rather on LP. Um,
Did you save any of the oranges they gave you?
I ate them.
Okay. And what did Richter play that you got to hear?
Schubert B flat major sonata.
Was it slow?
Yes. Well, Richter's tempi, as you know, tended to be always either very slow or very fast.
Mhm.
And the result was a very special angle of vision of the works. When Richter played the Liszt Sonata, which I heard in Philadelphia years later, the slow tempi were so slow and the fast tempi were so fast that the whole piece sounded like a slow move, a slow sonata with little uh, interruptions of very fast playing. Um, I did get to know Richter a little, not at this time, but later I did, and he was wonderfully nice.
You didn't talk to him at in Moscow about your playing or anything like
No, no, of course not. But he wrote something about me, and he played a recital in Philadelphia, which was my home, and I went accompanied by uh, an important man in the music world, and I had a ticket. I had tickets, rather, uh, right in the center and down in the orchestra section. And after the recital, when he was acknowledging applause, he took a flower that he'd been given and sent it directly to my wife, which I I, I can hardly believe that that happened, but it was so charming and so nice. And he was, of course, famously difficult, but I knew him only as wonderfully sweet and nice.
apparently he was quite difficult as a jury member that year in 58. He didn't really want to be there. And he would give either really high marks or really low marks.
Right.
Maybe some in between marks, but Gilels was trying to keep him in line, but he was just so stubborn. In any case, I'm wondering just I read somewhere, I think maybe in one of these biographies that you were looking forward to the opportunities to go out and see some of the famous sites around Moscow, maybe that you'd only read about, or I don't know if you remember it's any of your sort of field trips, but could you just
Yes, yes. Well,
describe the city?
we were taken as a group. We were taken to see the cathedrals, and I was very happy. But we didn't get to see the cathedrals. We were just taken to the courtyard, and they photographed us. And I saw that they weren't going to show us anything. They were just going to make propaganda films. So I walked away, and I walked into one of the uh, cathedrals, and I heard later that people were just beside themselves, and eventually I came back, and it was a daring thing to do, but I survived, as you see. And another thing, when they were filming, when we were in Klin, in the home of Tchaikovsky, he had a home in Klin. Um, I was asked to play while they were talking or broadcasting, and I played different things, and then I got tired of playing the same things, and I started playing the Webern variations, and they suddenly heard this, and Tchaikovsky, пожалуйста, Tchaikovsky. Uh, so um, I I repeated that years later when I was on the jury of the competition. That was, of course, decades later, and I did the same thing. Again, I was asked to play in Clean. It was amazing how life repeated itself. And again, I played Greybeard.
That time they let you play
They
through.
let me. They let me play.
uh it was a time of slightly eased tensions.
Right.
I think I even saw somewhere um somebody described the late 50s in Moscow as a sort of maybe an early perestroika, or just a soft easing of
Mhm.
after Stalin, before the Cuban Missile Crisis, before the sort of space race. Although I suppose a year earlier, the Soviets had just gotten to space. So, but the fact was, it was the right time and the right place for somebody like Van Cliburn, I think, to
Yes.
do what
Yes.
he did.
Yes. And Van said to the American ambassador at a lunch, and I was standing there, and I'm reporting what I heard. He said, and I said to Mr. Khrushchev, Mr. Khrushchev, um, we all have to love each other. And for me, I want to be the first pianist on the moon. And, I didn't appreciate Van at the time. I mean, today I realize that was extraordinarily brilliant, that he knew just what to say. And over the years, I saw that he did have that amazing uh, capacity to find just the right tone for everything he spoke.
um, why do you think you didn't appreciate him at the time? Was he kind of a simple Southern boy, or?
Yes, yes, yes. He was a hick, I was a North an Eastern snob, and uh, his the whole sound of his oratory was something that I didn't identify with, and I had to learn to appreciate it.
What about his playing? Were you cynical about his advancing and eventually winning that year?
Not really, because he was a wonderful pianist, and I knew that, and but I didn't assume that he could win, and there were other contestants, of course, um, but you see, what was so astonishing was the expressiveness of his playing, as opposed to the playing of the Russians, which tended to be overly mechanistic. Um, and people were so excited. And then there was something about him, you know. People came to me all the time during the competition to talk to me about that. And he's like a son to me, one woman said, I remember. And she said it in French, but his appearance, his height, his blonde hair, his Texas accent, and his playing.
Mhm.
It all was irresistible. He was the man of the moment.
Speaking of the Cold War and Van and Khrushchev, apparently Vera Gornostayeva, who had given lessons to Gilels's daughter Elena, was later invited to meet with Khrushchev, and he told her that Gilels had argued on behalf of giving the prize to Van, asserting that, quote, it could end the Cold War and there
Huh?
will be peace. And the Soviet leader seemed to believe it. I'm reading from the biography where you're also quoted by Isakov, Stewart.
Yeah.
Um, but in any case, that seems like a naive thing to say, but at the time, the Cold War had not reached its dangerous extremes that it would in a few years. It had only been around for 10 years. Maybe
Yes.
maybe a cultural moment like this could have just
Yes.
helped diplomatically. It wasn't that insane an idea, was it, at the time?
Yes. I heard different stories, and they all tended towards the same idea. I was told that Richter went to Khrushchev and said, "What shall we do?" I think it was Richter. Now I could, it could have been Gilels in my story, but the other person was Khrushchev, and Khrushchev said, "Is the American really the best?" I was told, and the answer was yes. And he said, "Well, then give it to him." Uh, I I'm happy to tell that story because that wouldn't have happened elsewhere, and I'm very touched. I, you know, there was a dinner after the competition for everybody given by Khrushchev, and Van played, and on Khrushchev's request, he played the Chopin F minor's Fantasy.
Mhm.
Now, that's not the Webern variations, but my point is that it showed a real artistic taste, and any country that has a leader who wants to hear the Chopin Fantasy gets my vote.
Um, so were you at, I guess there must have not been anything else to do besides attend all the events, but were you hearing the other competitor? Did you hear Van's sort of final round performances? At that point, I don't think you were in the competition anymore. Did you go to everything? Or was
No,
you?
I went to some things. Um, I went to Shtarkman's Chopin F minor concerto. Shtarkman, who won the fourth prize in the competition, and whose son won the fourth prize in the Cliburn competition, and who studied with me in the summer. So, um, but time revealed those things, of course, little by little. Um, so I heard Starkman's beautiful F minor concerto. I heard the second prize, I think, was shared, and the wonderful Russian who ended up in Australia and who I got to know a little bit. Um, I heard him, and
Lev Vlassenko?
Vlassenko, thank you. Thank you. Exactly. Exactly. Yes. He was wonderful, wonderful pianist, but also a very, very fine and intelligent person.
And Daniel Pollack, I was reading that a lot of people thought he was actually doing really well in the competition, and some said maybe was even more of a favorite than Van. But then he got the wrong memo or something, got confused about the final round, and I think he had to put together his one of his concertos kind of at the last second. Apparently, he didn't give as good of a final round performance. Do you
Yes.
remember? Do you remember
Yes.
that?
I'm familiar with that story, the last part of which is not, in my opinion, true. But it was the Tchaikovsky concerto, and he hadn't performed it before. But that's not the point. I actually consciously decided not to bring this subject up, but it's true that there were people who were pushing for Danny very much. And are you in touch with Daniel?
No, I don't know him personally, and if you don't want to speak on the matter, you don't have to.
No,
I don't
no,
want to bring up
no,
old
no,
gossip, but
no. Well, he made a tremendous impression in the second round, and I think it was because of that that his third round was such a disappointment.
meaning he practiced so much for the second round that he wasn't as ready for the finals.
I mean something like that, but I'm not going to uh, rejudge the results. Um, uh, I I see myself at a table with Daniel and his wife Noemi across from me, and one of them is saying, and even the Japanese, the Japanese was I think seventh prize winner. Daniel um, managed to get it into history that he was second prize winner, but actually he was eighth prize winner. Um, but he was and doubtless still is, a master virtuoso.
Mhm.
And, everybody can't win competitions. And
Sure.
he did want to win like as everybody else did.
So just bringing back to something you said, and I won't keep you too much longer, but um, you mentioned that maybe the Soviet pianists, with Vlassenko the exception, were weren't quite capturing the romantic spirit of the composers of their own country.
That's right.
What do you make of all of that?
When I was a judge in the competition, I had a similar impression when the first prize winner was won by a Japanese young woman. And let me throw this out as a feeling. The Russians knew the Tchaikovsky concerto too well, and they'd lost contact with it. It was that piece, that you did this and you did that and you did the other thing, and Van came onto the scene, and looking the way he looked and being the way he was, he played in what was a new fashion for them. If we heard it today, what would we think? I don't know. I know that he was always a very expressive pianist, and and he was an amazing person actually,
Mhm.
and it all came together. But one mustn't overgeneralize. And of course, I don't. I didn't hear everybody.
You're quoted in the biography as having mentioned that just a little bit about Van's character. Partly what made him charming and quirky was apparently he was late to everything. uh,
Yes, yes, and that's part of the. That's not the story of the competition. It's the story of Van, and that's very interesting.
mhm,
You see, and I do have a theory about that.
mhm.
Van, whom over the years, I never knew him intimately, but I knew him over many years and rather well. And has never been a more generous, lavishly friendly person. Um, when when my wife died, he sent me 2 dozen roses of the a kind of beauty that I'd never seen before. I didn't know such things existed, and this was this was the sort of thing that he did just as a routine, and he always kept people waiting. And to me, and this is just me talking, uh, this was not an accident. This was his way of getting back at the world. And he really did keep people waiting. I, even in Moscow, I somehow found myself sitting in a car waiting for Van, and with Norman Shetler, who said to me, "Well, here we are, two boys from Philadelphia." That comes to my mind, but um, that capacity of keeping, or necessity, obligation to keep people waiting, that of course lasted always through his career. Later on, when he was booked with important orchestras, there was a certain kind of conductor who would refuse to have the piano concerto on the second half of the program. And if that happened, Van would agree, but then he wouldn't show up until the second half, so that they would have to um, reverse the program. And yes, I think that was part of the whole mystery of how he functioned.
Do you think he got too famous for his own good as a pianist, as a
Well, well,
concert
well,
pianist?
well. Of course. I mean, I there that expressed itself in various ways, and one of them was that he asked, or his manager asked for too much money, and that meant that gradually the great orchestras stopped engaging him, and he would be engaged in places where uh, some supporter of music would say, "If you get Van Cliburn, I'll pay for him,"
Mm.
which was fine. But then he had to play Rachmaninoff third, or Tchaikovsky. Van, everybody always said that he didn't have a repertoire, but that's not true. Of course, he had a large repertoire, but he almost never explored it because people wanted the hits in order to justify the expense. Um, well, it's an old story now, and if you add it all together, it's been a great thing. The competition, the Cliburn competition, has been a great thing, and it's the result, after all, of the Tchaikovsky competition. And he was a great man, a great speaker, and a great pianist. And yes, he could have done different things, but he did what he did. So I'm I'm thanking him for that.
We wouldn't want it any other way at this point. I mean,
Well, I can't get it any other way.
that's right.
um, no, look, I think of him when he was still in high school before the competition, and I was one evening with my future wife my girlfriend at the time, when we bumped into him, he'd come back from a revival meeting, and he was so excited, and it was very genuine and very very touching. And as I said before, I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but I do now, and I feel that it was a privilege to be associated with him, and certainly a privilege to be in that competition. And at the time, I wasn't happy. First of all, I would have liked to do better in the competition, but there are always things to feel unhappy about. But in retrospect, it was one of the great experiences of my life, and I'm happy to reminisce about it.
Well, as a Texan with East Coast sensibilities, I'm grateful for both you and Van and everything you represent in the music world. I think, we need lots of different personalities. It wouldn't be the same if everybody was an intellectual, so I suppose. But
Right, right. Well, thanks so much, Ben.